I'm Jaclyn Friedman, and I am having a fantastic time here at Republica. I'm so excited to meet with folks from all over Europe talking about how to use digital social media to create a better world. I was talking about some recent feminist digital activism and basically going through case studies talking about how digital online activism works and how it doesn't work, and sort of the lessons that we can learn about how to do more effective activism using digital tools. You know, I did some traveling around Berlin before I got back to my hotel, and I got back online and there were like 40 some odd tweets about my talk, most of which were really great. So I was really encouraged by that. There was one negative tweet, but then in my inbox, someone had gone to my website and sent me a very long hate mail about how fat and undesirable I was, and how most feminists are, and how in Europe we don't have any of these problems, so that my analysis doesn't hold and I should go back to the United States. When I get those kinds of attacks, I tend to think, oh, I hit a nerve, right? Like, this person thinks that my message was powerful and he wants to do something to undermine me. I try to take it as a compliment, right? If he thought that I had no impact, he wouldn't have bothered. I think that the problem is that the mainstream media, only repeats that stereotype, right? Because it's held by the media consolidation is such that there's so little diversity in the messages that we hear from the corporate media that it just gets perpetuated over and over again. And so then it becomes something that most people believe, when in fact feminists come in many, many different varieties, look all different ways, act all different ways. Some of us are very funny. Yeah. And, and honestly, the other part of that is that there are things to be legitimately angry about. And so being accused of being angry, I don't understand why that's an accusation necessarily. When your basic human rights are being violated regularly, it makes a person angry. And I am angry about a lot of things having to do with sexism, and I don't apologize for that. I mean, I've been an activist in one form or another since high school. It's sort of, yeah.
But don't you feel like you're having the same arguments over and over again?
I do sometimes feel that way. I do. And what that tells me is that we need to come up with different strategies, right? And I think that's one of the great possibilities of digital media, is that there are so many different ways of telling stories now and reaching people directly without having to go through the corporate media. And I think that the possibilities there are really exciting, and some of the cases that I talked about are about sort of doing those end runs and getting that across. But yeah, sure, sometimes I feel frustrated that we're having these same conversations, that I had 20 years ago when I was on a college campus. So we're still having the exact same conversations now. Yeah, but it doesn't mean we should stop. It just means we need to do better. I do think that the hashtag as activism took a step forward from the More and Me campaign. People understood suddenly the potential of it, because it's so easy to participate, and it can directly get to the target, right? It used to be that you would have to write a letter to Michael Moore to try and reach him, post, and you would have no idea, like, is he ever going to read that letter? Is his assistant reading that letter? Will he ever see it? You don't know. But on Twitter, that Michael Moore is reading his Twitter account, and if he's not responding, that's a choice he's personally making, and that he is hearing you. And so whatever response you're getting is a real response, and that makes him more accountable. I really do think that Twitter has made us all more accountable to each other in that way. And it also means that it's so easy for us to participate together. Like I was talking about yesterday, it's just such a great, perfect medium to aggregate all of our stories in a place where it can be read together. If we all told the same stories or made the same protests on Facebook, they would be on our individual pages, right? But on Twitter, with the power of the hashtag is that they all appear in one place. And so no one can say, oh, this is just one isolated voice. And I think that was really the power of that campaign, and people have seen that and the potential of it, and I really do see it starting to take off in new ways. I feel like I'm not as familiar as I'd like to be with European feminists. One of the things that I'm hoping from being here is to get more connected to European feminists and figure out how that we can be working together. I'm sure I have a lot to learn from European feminists and vice versa. I think that in the U.S. there is a perception that it's easier here. And I'm suspicious of that perception. I'm very eager to hear sort of the reality check on that. I mean, I certainly don't believe what my gentleman friend who wrote me said about how there are no problems here. But I think that especially when it comes to issues around sexuality and women's sexuality, there's this sort of perception that it's paradise over here. And my impression from talking to actual European women is that that's far from the case. That's a tricky one. We are struggling with that in the U.S. also, that there are sort of two places for women to be in pop culture. You can either be sort of pure and sweet and virginal and passive, or you can be practically naked, right? And there's nothing wrong with being either of those things, but having those be the only two options is a real challenge. The American Psychological Association did a study of sexualization, and the word sexualization they define as when someone is being made to be an object, made to be about their sexuality, and their sexuality is being defined for them as opposed to being an agent on behalf of their own sexuality. And that the impact is real, that girls who are exposed to sexualization have eating disorders, they do less well in school. I mean, these are real, there are real impacts on girls, not just, it feels bad, but it actually impacts our ability to live free, complete lives and live up to our potential. I mean, part of the way to combat that is to make our own media, right? That because we have these new digital tools, we can do things like web shorts or, make our own magazines and create roles of powerful women. But that's only half the solution. I think that we also have to hold the corporate media accountable because they're the ones with the huge audiences, right? When we make our own media, it's great, but it's hard to get the kind of audiences that the big corporate media does. And so you can do a More and Me style campaign if you see an example of that in the corporate media and hold them accountable. You can do boycotts. I really recommend that we vote with our dollars, right? So you spend money on media that creates images that you want more of in the world, right? And you don't give your money to media that you don't want to create more of in the world. Because every time you spend money on media or even eyeballs for advertiser-driven media, you're saying, I want more of this in the world. And so being thoughtful consumers of media can have a real impact on what media gets created, especially if we organize, we do that collectively. Is that good?
Thanks a lot.